Yep.
Okay, let's wait. Give it 10 more seconds for people to join before we make the introduction. We still have people joining, but that's fine. Okay, let's get to it. Everybody, welcome to this live lesson by myself. I'm Marc Olsen. I'm a Backgammon Grandmaster and I'm CEO of Backgammon Galaxy. And with me, I have Hossein, who's a master level player. That's one level below Grandmaster. Probably next year or something, he will hopefully join the Grandmaster Club. And he's also our community manager on Backgammon Galaxy. So today we're going to focus on some of the basic strategies. So it is a lesson for beginners or rookies. If you are already an advanced player, that's okay. You can listen in. Everybody is welcome, but you're probably not going to get too much out of it. Maybe you get some new ideas on how to explain some of these strategies to new players. But that's the agenda for today. Hossein is going to give a 15-minute, more or less, introduction on strategies. And then I'm going to do a 15 minutes, more or less, on some of the fundamental concepts that we apply over the board. So if everybody is ready, and by the way, after that, we can take questions. So anybody who's got questions about anything backgammon strategy related, you feel free to ask, and no questions are stupid. We'll answer all of them as well as we can. If you have questions with regards to Backgammon Galaxy, let's save them for later. You can text them to us on Instagram or Facebook or something like that, and we'll always be there to answer your questions about it. So let's try to keep this session just about strategy. We are recording and we might put it on YouTube. We're not sure about that. So if you don't want to be on YouTube, don't ask any questions. But if you don't mind, you can ask, anybody can ask us questions. So Hossein, without further ado, you can begin.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. Hey guys, I'm Hossein, and it's quite difficult to talk about backgammon in front of one of the greatest to ever do it. But yeah, I try my best not to be rude in front of Marc, of course. So yeah, I'm gonna be explaining strategies, and I want to start off with pip counts. Maybe it's a bit boring for the people who already know the pip count, but it's gonna be fun in future, of course. And yeah, so pip count is pip is the move unit of a checker.
Maybe you should share your board,
yes.
your XG board, Hossein.
Okay. That's it. You can see the board, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So the pip is the move unit of a checker, and the pip count is the total number of the pips that all of your checkers needs to move to get them all out of the board. And the pip count is like you can aggregate your all of your pip counts and get your pip count, which is shown in Backgammon Galaxy, like on the board. You can see it on XG. You can see it, as you can see on my XG. You can see 167 pips to take off all of my checkers from the board. And yeah, there you can learn the race dictates the strategy, right? So whenever the first rule in backgammon is whenever you are ahead in the race, then race. So you know that it's really important to know the race if you are playing live, but if you are playing online, you can see the pip count, and it's easy to to decide which move to make, which strategy to choose. And there are four strategies in backgammon. The the first I want to explain priming strategy. So there are four strategies. First, priming. Second, blitzing. Third, racing, and fourth, contact, or let's say waiting game. So it's a bit maybe you can order it yourself probably, but it doesn't matter which order you call your um, strategies, because yeah, you can choose the board and the formation of your checkers dictates the game plan. You cannot choose your own game plans.
Can I just
So
quickly jump in, Hossein?
sure.
Just maybe something that was not completely clear from what you said. Like the reason we have exactly four game plans is because there is just four ways of winning the game in backgammon.
Right.
It's either by priming, which is blocking. Maybe you can show it on the board, Hossein, what a prime looks like.
Yes.
And blitzing, racing, and then a waiting game. So this is the games that Hossein is going to show us examples of. And this idea that you don't really choose your own game plan, it's the board that dictates which game plans in which you are strong or your opponent is strong. So we try to make moves that fits the game plan where you are strong and your opponent is weak, and not vice versa.
Right.
Okay, sorry, just to clarify.
Yeah. Yeah, that was perfect. And yeah, so priming game plan, I want to explain priming game plan as the first one, because it's probably the best game plan because it eliminates the pip count. But it's important to know that the timing is really important in priming game plans, and yeah, so it might be not easy to get it, but if you get it, it's the best game plan probably. And yeah, so let's say you have a formation like this. If you have a formation like this, it doesn't matter how many pips you are. Let's not get it too fancy. You are behind because you are winning, right? Or let's say even make it even. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if you are behind in the race because you have primed your opponent, you have blocked your opponent's way out, so you are winning the game. And by the time that you get all of your checkers in, and probably close out your opponent, and your opponent is probably like this, but has one guy on the bar, let's say, and you have taken off some checkers, and he just gets in, and then you win the game, right? So this is the priming game plan. And there's blitzing game plan. Uh, Blitzing is when you close out your opponent. Let's say you roll, let's say in the opening, your opponent rolls 4-3, plays it like this, and you roll double fives, and you, of course, you uh, hit and close the third point, the 3 point, and this is instantly you are choosing the blitzing game plan because this is the best move at this point, and you are winning the game, the blitz. And blitz is really good because you can win gammons. Sometimes you can win even backgammons. And when you close out your board, you're winning immediately. So it's really great. And one quick note, when your blitzing game plan fails, you can go for a racing game plan. So it's nice to know. But in blitzing game plan, the order of getting the points inside your board doesn't matter too much. For instance, if you roll 6-3, at this point, you of course hit on the 4 point. because you don't care if you get hit. You care, but it's really good to know that you need to attack your opponent. And here you can get hit 12 out of 36, which is all the fours, 11 numbers plus double twos. So it's not a lot of numbers. Yeah, thank you, Mark, for helping putting the numbers. Yeah, so this is really amazing. And this is blitzing game plan. And another quick note that whenever your opponent, this is just came to my mind. Whenever your opponent rolls a early double five in the game, you should never touch your back checkers if you haven't got hit, right? So that's another note for maybe
I think
a
maybe
bit
Hussein, there was
advanced players.
Sorry, can I just quickly interrupt again?
Yeah, sure.
Again, there was something that was not completely crystal clear, and that is when you go for the blitz attack, which you just showed, like you attack with double five. The purpose is that you go for an immediate closeout, right?
Yep.
Unlike the priming game plan where you're building a blocking structure to trap your enemy's back checkers so they can't move. Here you go for an immediate kill, and the purpose, the goal, when the blitz plan mission is accomplished, that's when you make a closeout like this exactly.
Yep.
So you're talking about the scenarios where the blitz fails, so the opponent survives the blitz attack. He comes in and anchors up, and then you have to play a racing game plan because you cannot really make a priming game plan after a failed blitz attack.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I was going to say talk about the structure as well. Maybe after I can talk about structures because I have explained the priming and blitzing. So yeah, you can recognize the blitzing game plan by just looking at it, as we learned from Mochi in the masterclass chapter 1, right? So if you look at the white checkers, you can see this looks like a blitzing game plan, right? Because
Why does it
your
look
deeper
like a blitzing game plan?
yeah, because the deeper points are made and you have stacks. You have a stack. So if your deeper points are made and you have a stack, you are probably in a blitzing game plan. And why? Because it's you can't choose any other game plans. Probably you cannot prime your opponent. For example, let's say you have made these two deep points and your opponent is here. Yeah, so it's almost impossible to prime your opponent here, right? So this is a blitzing formation. But
So a blitz formation is characterized by deep points made,
deep
and
points
stacks, and a lot of checkers in the zone. So for instance, in your example, you had 10 men in the zone, and the zone is from the 11 point and into your 1 point. That's your front position. So with 10 men in the zone, it's very likely that you can succeed in a blitz attack.
Yeah, also know that 8 checkers in the zone is weak, probably not in the example that we made in the beginning, because that's different. It's beginning of the game. But if you have 8 checkers in the zone, it's weak. If you have 9 checkers, it's probably okay. But if you have 10 or more, it's a strong zone on your board.
So basically, if we only have 8 men in the zone, we typically shouldn't go for a blitz attack. We should just try
Right.
to make normal priming plays. But if we have 10 and the opportunity arises, then we can go for the blitz attack.
Right. Yeah, so this is a formation of a blitzing game plan. And a priming formation is more like you can feel it like it's a what happened? It's a flat position and it's concrete. There's not too many gaps, so you can see that the position is flat and concrete. So this is priming formation. and you don't even care about your opponent's checkers right now. You just look at your own checkers and you can recognize what is your formation right now. So this is a example of a priming formation, and you can see it's concrete and it's flat. There's no stacks, no deeper points made, and that's it about the.
Okay, Hus, when
Yeah.
we identify we have a prime formation, what can we use that for? Why is that relevant information?
Yeah, so it's, you know that you can't go for a blitz if you have the opportunity to hit your opponent on the ace point, or let's say you roll 6-5 here. You can't go for the ace point and hit. You're giving too many shots to your opponent, and it's best to go for a priming game plan, right?
So it's because we want to make moves in the game plan where we are strong. And if we have a very strong priming game plan, let's say he has 2 men trapped down here. Now we have a very strong prime, then that's our preferred game plan. So we should make moves accordingly, right?
Exactly.
And if
Yeah.
we have a blitz formation, then it doesn't make sense to make priming game plan moves. We're weak in the priming game plan if we have a blitz formation. So we should make moves that fits to the blitzing game plan.
Exactly. Yeah. So you always look at the board, look at the pip count, and decide what game plan suits your board, suits your formation, your checkers. And there's racing game plan. And let's say you have this position.
So this is game plan number 3 now.
Number 3 now. Yeah. Yeah. So let's say you have this formation. Not too many, maybe not too fancy. And when you are ahead in the race again, we're going back to the when you are ahead in the race. So after the roll, you are ahead 18 pips. So it's best to just go all the way to the 8 point. This is a racing game plan. You don't look for anything else. You just don't care about anything else. You are ahead in the race and you just go for the race. So if you see anything like this, you just instantly look at the pip count and then decide whether you want to stay or you want to leave the anchor. So let's say your opponent now has the advantage in the pip count. Let's say the position is like this. Now it's different. Now you should stay back and build your board and try to get a shot later on in the game. So this is a basic racing game position. And you should always look at the pip count. It's most of the times it's easy to just look at the pip count and decide whether you want to stay or you just want to leave the anchor. So that's the racing game plan. And there's other examples that I can make. Maybe a couple of more examples. Let's say you have one checker back. There's a saying, probably maybe a rule of thumb that I really like, which is like last man is probably most of the times it's running. It should be running. So let's say you roll 5-3. Let's see the result. Yeah, so here you can see a lot of beginners make the 3 point here. But as you can see, if you are ahead in the race, you should try to maximize your chances in winning in a racing game, right? So here 5-3, you shouldn't make the board. You should just go all the way out. Although you are giving a lot of shots with the 4s and the deuces, but you should go all the way out to the 16 point. And there's another point in the racing game that I want to mention, which is in a racing game, you're not, if your opponent is in a, let's say, holding game and you're in a racing game, you don't try to make to block your opponent. It's not useful. It's gonna hurt your game plan. So let's say here you roll double two. What would you play? Okay, so here if I double, here you can see the best play is to just play to 9 point. You just don't want to block your opponent's sixes because it's gonna be harder for you to clear the 11 point later on in the game, and you are ahead in the game, and you just need to go for a simple game, and you can clear your points later on much easier. So this is
Hossein,
another example.
can I try
Yeah,
to
sure.
elaborate a little bit on this?
Sure.
Because this is a very, very important strategy. It's a fundamental strategy idea in backgammon. If you are ahead in the race, that is, you have fewer pips to go than your opponent, you favor running plays. You just want to break contact, bring your checkers home, because then you're going to win. If you are not ahead in the race, then you don't want to race. Then you have to prime and block your opponent, because otherwise your opponent is just going to run into a race and then they will win. So this is the example here that Hossein is showing us is actually really cool, because you have two different styles of moves here. If you make the 11 point down here, then you're just trying to prime your opponent, because you're blocking the opponent's sixes. So you're trapping him by doing this. But because of the pip count, because we're so much ahead in the pip count, it's not the right strategy. We should just break contact and just run. So this is a very, very important strategy idea, and it back propagates even back to the opening game or the second roll of the game, that every time you're ahead in the race, you tend to favor freedom and running. Every time you're behind in the race, you tend to favor staying back and building a strong prime.
Yeah, so I made some changes. I gave the some pip counts to blue right now, and it's better to just make the 11 point, because you're not longer ahead in the race. Like it's not too much to count on it. So it's really important to know what is your pip count, what is your game plan, and go for that game plan.
We might also
the
say
way.
that some of you guys who are new to the game listening to this, don't panic. You know, over the board, it's difficult to count the pips. For the most part, you don't need to know the pip count, but you do need to estimate whether you are ahead or if you are behind, because that's what dictates strategy. If you're ahead, you tend to favor racing. If you're behind, you tend to favor priming.
Right. So, okay, so one of the guys cannot see the board. You can click on Hossein's screen and you can see the board. Okay, so that's the racing game plan. And hopefully it's simple. You don't look for anything harmful for your game plan. You just don't look for hitting. If you have opportunity to hit your opponent, you probably don't want to hit. And we can make some examples on that as well. But we need to move on to the last game plan, which is contact or waiting game. Some might call it holding game, but Marc doesn't like that terminology. But
I like terms to be self-explanatory. So for historical reasons, we often call these some type of contact games holding games, but it doesn't really explain much. So I actually prefer the term waiting game. And there are many variations of it. You can have an anchor, you can advanced anchor, deep anchor. You can have a back game. That's when you got two anchors in your opponent's home board. You can have a one-man back. You can have split back checkers. Many variations of contact game. But the idea is that everything failed. Your priming, blitzing, racing failed, but you still have a chance to win the game, which is actually what makes backgammon fun, unlike some other games where an early head start it just takes 2 hours, but you're certainly going to win. In backgammon, if you just have 1 point of contact, you still have a chance of winning. So that's the game plan Hossein is going to tell us about now.
Yes. So here you can see you are ahead in the race. White is ahead in the race, but blue has a lot of winning chances because it has. Let's change the double two is a great role here. So as you can see, it's 30% winning chances for blue. It's not over yet. So as Marc said, it's the fun thing about backgammon. And if you have, like, let's say the 3 point and your opponent's position is like this, you're really likely here to get a shot. And actually sometimes it's better to be back in this kind of position that your opponent doesn't have a good structure and is likely to leave a shot. So for instance, if you are on the 5 point, on the golden point, you have less winning chances because you're less likely to get a shot. Or even here, it could be even less. Yep, yeah, almost the same. And yeah, so you can always get a shot. And there's a lot of variations. I'm gonna explain all the variations that Marc taught. Just
You
a
don't have to
few
show them all,
seconds.
Hossein. Well, I have a question. Maybe you can
Okay.
explain this to the people here. Is the contact game plan something you actively can seek out, or is it more something that just happens when all the other game plans fail?
Yeah, that's the thing about the waiting game plan, the contact game plan, which is when all the other game plans fails, you can always have the contact game plan. It's not desirable to just go for a contact game plan, but it's just the last game plan, we call it, right? So
Right.
let me maybe it's interesting for some of the friends to know all the variations of the holy games. Do you think
Let's move on, host, because we're a
okay,
little bit behind schedule. Maybe we get
okay,
some
cool.
questions on it, and then we can take them
Okay, cool.
later.
So yeah, so there are many variations of the contact game plan, and yeah, so you learned 4 game plans: priming, blitzing, racing, and contact game plan. And remember that the dice and the formation dictates the game plans, and you cannot choose it yourself. By knowing that those game plans, you cannot choose, okay, right now I want to go for a prime or blitz. No, the position tells you you should go for this game plan.
Right. Okay. Okay. So can I share my board, horse?
Yes, sure.
Cool. Share. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So before I tell you guys about the 4 fundamental principles, there was just something that I thought of when Hossein was giving his presentation here. Something cool. I just want to elaborate a little bit because this is actually something really cool about backgammon. I want to show you an opening sequence here. Let's say we open with a 3-1, let's say. And now the opponent rolls a double 5, and he doesn't really have many ways to play it other than bring these two down to the 22 point. Now we roll, let's say we roll a 4-1. Already in the 3rd roll of the game, this is a practical example that illustrates these ideas that Hossein was telling us about. It's quite clear for both players what their preferred game plan is. For us, our preferred game plan is definitely priming, because we have a prime formation. We have no stacks, we have no deep points made. We have lots of builders coming from the back to fill out the gaps in our prime. We have good potential to build a strong prime here. And we are behind in the race, so we don't want to go for racing. Our opponent, this is a blitz formation because he already has 10 men in the zone. That's a lot. And he's ahead in the race. And it's going to be difficult for the opponent here to build a prime formation. That's why we want to induce a priming game. If we can trap, the best way to punish a blitz formation is to build a strong prime. So here with 4-1, the best way is clearly just to play like this. Don't touch your back checkers. You don't want to split into a blitz formation. It's dangerous. He can now execute his blitz attack. That's where he is strong. We're not strong in a blitz attack. We're strong in a priming game. So we make this move. This is nice and flexible. And we have a good chance of building a prime here. So imagine that both players from this position just rolls some sort of average rolls. And we get to build a prime. And the opponent here doesn't really get to build anything. He ends up with something like this. In this position, we are winning. He can't escape easily. It's very difficult for him to escape. He's going to crunch. And to crunch is when you start collapsing your front position like this. We call it crunching. And that's the worst thing that can happen in backgammon. When that happens, you're almost sure to win. The player who is behind in the pip count is a favorite to keep their prime longer. So it's actually sometimes a disadvantage to be ahead in the pip count, because that means you have worse timing, which means you're going to crunch first if you can't escape the back checkers. So that's that beautiful push and pull relationship between the race and timing in backgammon. So just because you're ahead in the race, typically it's a net positive to be ahead in the race. I would say in all position types, it is an advantage to be ahead in the race, except for one, namely priming battles. If you manage to trap your opponent behind a prime, then it's actually an advantage to be behind in the race, because that means you can get your opponent to crunch like this, and then you're just winning. You're just destroying him. Okay, that was just like a little bit of a...
Yeah. So 2 notes that I want to add. That whenever your opponent rolls an early double 5, do not touch your back checkers. That's the rule of thumb. Do not touch your back checkers. You can always remember that and try to build your own home board. That's one point that I wanted to add. Another thing is that against a blitzing game plan, since you are behind in the race, and when you are behind in the race, you always tend to play for a priming game plan. So these are rule of thumbs that you can use it all the time and you can remember, and it's always useful.
It's a great rule of thumb. Never split your back checkers early if your opponent has rolled a double 5. Now we also know the reason why, and the reason is that the opponent has a strong blitzing game plan. And what we don't want when your opponent has a strong blitzing game plan is opening up our back checkers. Now we are vulnerable to getting blitz attacked and closed out. So stay on the anchor when you're facing a blitz formation. If you're facing a prime formation like this, now you want to split your back checkers. Now you're not worried about getting blitz attacked and closed out. Now you're worried about getting primed. Therefore, you should split your back checkers, move them up as fast as possible so you can make an advanced anchor, or you can just run with one of them. So we split against prime formations, and we don't split against blitz formations. Good stuff, Hus. Okay, cool. Let's move on. So these were the ideas about the game plans. If you have any questions, you can write them in the chat and we'll try to take them later. But let's just continue with our presentation here and then we do questions. Okay, I'm going to talk about the 4 fundamental principles of backgammon. At least this is how I see it. In my philosophy, these are the 4 main concepts or principles. And the reason why they are important is because these 4 principles that I'm about to show you is telling us what is desirable. What is it that we want to do? Sometimes we can't do what we want to do because it's too risky, but that's a risk-reward calculation we have to do afterwards. First, we need to know what is it that we desire. What is it that looks good on a backgammon board? Okay, so principle number 1 is what I call utilization. Utilization of your checkers. What checkers want to do is they want to make points. So for instance, these 4 checkers are perfectly utilized. They're making a point. They're doing what they desire. You could say that all 4 of these checkers are running at 100% utilization. So for instance, if we take the opening position here, you could say that the first 2 checkers here in the 6 point, they are running at 100% utilization. They could not be put into better use than this. Then you get the 3rd checker or the first spare checker. It's also very useful, but it's not 100%. Maybe it's like 85% or something like that. It's a highly useful checker. It's being utilized because we need to put it in action. If you don't see my screen, click on my name in the Zoom on my webcam. I think then my screen goes big. Okay, back to the explanation here. The second spare checker or the fourth checker on a point, again, we have a diminishing return. We're probably down to 70%. It's still rather useful. You could roll double one or double two or something, and you could make new points with it, but it's not as useful as the first spare checker. Then we get to the fifth spare checker, and that's where we see a dramatic fall. This is almost a checker out of play. I think we're down to 10% or something like that. Maybe, yeah, very underutilized. It's almost like playing with 14 checkers, and we don't want that. We want to play with as many checkers as possible. We need the checkers to develop our structures. So knowing this means that stacks are bad, and one of our highest priorities is to get those checkers utilized. We need to get them into the action. A good way of knowing who's ahead in a backgammon position is to just make a utilization count. If you kind of just make an aggregate count of all of your checkers and sum them up, how well utilized they are, whoever has a better total utilization is typically winning the position. Let me show you a couple of examples. Let's say we have, no, sorry, I forgot one thing. There's another obvious thing. Just like stacks are bad, so is buried checkers. So let's say we have 3 checkers on the ace point here. This is obviously bad because you could say at least the 2 first, they're not particularly useful because they're behind the anchor, but at least they do something. At least it's an inner board point. But the third is 100% dead. This is a 0% utility checker. We might as well play with 14 checkers. Therefore, early in the game, in the middle game, it is basically illegal for you strategy-wise to bury checkers. Don't bury your checkers. You can only do that later in the game if the risk of leaving a checker exposed is too high. Then it's okay. Then we might have to do it. But early in the game and in the middle game, never do it. It's a death sin. You will lose if you bury checkers. So that's at least the first way to improve your game. Stop burying checkers. Okay, a more subtle variation to this idea is, let's say we have this opening sequence. We roll 4-2, we make the 4 point. Our opponent also rolls 4-2, they make their 4 point. Now we roll a 6-3. It's 6-3, how to play it? How do we play this 6-3? You can think about it for a couple of seconds. Okay, so the rookie mistake is to make this play, where you are taking a builder from the midpoint and you're bringing it to the 4 point. Because what did we just do to this checker? This checker is now not very utilized. You just played it past 2 points you're trying to make. Don't do that. You don't want to bring checkers past the points you're trying to make. Now it's an underutilized checker. We call it a dilly builder because it's rather useless. So the best play here is to do something like this. Come out and down. This is good because look, we unstacked. We put this checker here into play. Now it's ready to be utilized to make the 5 point or the 7 point. And we also put this checker here to make the anchor. So use your checkers, put your checkers to good use. That's the whole idea here. Another cool example is, let's say...
Sorry, I have to say that put your checkers where they belong.
Oh yeah, that's a famous quote from the legend Paul McGrill. He always said, put your checkers where they belong. I would even elaborate and say, put your checkers to good use. So it's not only about placing them in the right positions, it's also about putting them back into play if they're stacked. Another example of this is the following sequence. Let's say we roll a 3-1 opening. Now the opponent rolls, let's say they roll a 5-3 or whatever, and now we roll double one. Again, take a few seconds and think about how you would play this double one.
Those 2 there, and that one there.
Okay, so I think this is where a lot of rookies get this wrong. A lot of players, they play something like, let me see if I can even find it. Here we go. They play something like this. They slide over to make the 7 point. That's an improvement. Very good. Now you're blocking 6s. They create flexibility with 6 to 5. That's a concept we're going to talk about in a moment. And then they split the back checkers. All of these things are great things to do. So how can this be a blunder? The best play is this play. Make the 4 point. Because look at this perfect checker utilization. It could not be better. All 8 checkers are being put to use 100%. So this is just a fantastic move and a fantastic roll. Also, we call this structure here with the 4, 5, and 6 point, we call it the rack because it's a torture to play against. So that's a very strong structure. When we can make the rack, it's typically correct to do so. Okay, moving on. This was probably the most important of the 4. The next concept is flexibility. Flexibility, actually, I just saw a question from Rasmus. I'm just going to stop quickly, go back, because this is a really cool question from Rasmus here. He asks, in this position we had, where we rolled a 6-3, he asked, why not play 2 down? Why not make this one? This is where you put your checkers where they belong, isn't it? Well, it's actually true. This is the most desirable move that we can find on the position. This is where we're optimizing checker utilization. But the problem is it's too risky because backgammon is also a race. We don't want to leave direct shots in our opponent in range here of our opponent to hit it. So it's simply too risky. It is the most desirable move, but it's too risky. So we compromise. We make this play. Okay, good question, Rasmus. Okay, going back. Concept number 2, flexibility. Flexibility means creating a position where you are in a position to improve your position next time, rather than creating something that's safe now, but it's going to deteriorate in a few moments. So a good example is 4-3, for instance. The best opening play here is just to unstack and bring 2 builders down. This creates flexibility. And you could even see it visually. Look at this beautiful distribution of checkers that you have. Basically, all of your rolls next turn is going to make key points, the 7, the 5, or the 4 point, or even the 3 point. So a flexible position is something that has a good likelihood of improving on the next roll. The rookie mistake here is to make this play where you're just stacking the 6 point. It's an absolutely horrible play. It's a blunder. And it's safe for now, yes, but your position is going to deteriorate in the future. Backgammon is very much a game where you constantly take small risks to improve. Because if you don't, then if you play too safe, then you're just going to deteriorate in the future. So the right approach is to constantly take small risks. So the top play here, 2 down like this, it's a good risk because you're only leaving indirect shots, which means your opponent has to use both their dice to hit. It's a tolerable risk. So basically, 2/3 of the time, they're not going to hit you here, and then you're in a great position to start building your prime. So that's a flexibility versus an inflexible position. Again, just like checker utilization, flexibility is something we desire. We always strive for more flexibility. But sometimes we have to compromise because it's too risky. But at least we know what we desire. Okay, so then Olifayomi in the chat asks, what about this move? This is also a good move to split the back checkers and unstack. A very balanced move. Actually, with 4-3, you have 3 more or less equally good moves. You have this one, that one, and then 2 down. I would say that I have a preference for playing this one if I want to split the back checker. So I split with a 3 instead of the 4, and then I unstack with a 4 up here. And the reason is that in the back, it doesn't really make a big difference whether you go to the 21 or the 20 point. Because yes, you want to make the 20 point. We call that the golden point. So it's a better point to make, but it's also more risky to go there because your opponent is going to hit loose. He's going to attack you to try to win the battle of the 20 point. By going to the 21 point, your opponent is still going to attack you, but it's not as risky because if you lose the battle of the 21 point, it's not as bad. So it's kind of like less risk and less reward to go to the 21 point. However, over here on the 9 point, there's a big difference whether you go to the 9 or the 10. Because if you go to the 9 point like this, you're better diversified. You have more flexibility. More of your dice combinations next time are gonna make key new points. Actually, all of your dice combinations next time, except for 5-1 and 3-2, will make a key point in your prime. If you do this one, which a lot of players do, you are duplicating some of your own good rolls, in particular 3-1 and 5-3. So 3-1, you want to make the 5 point, but that's, hey, wait, that's also what you're going to make the 7 point with. And the 5-3, okay, you also want to make the 5 point, but hey, that's also what we need to make the 3 point. So instead of diversifying your total dice combinations, you're duplicating some of them, which means you have less good rolls next time. It's a small, subtle detail. Maybe I went a little bit too far here explaining the details, but that's why I prefer actually splitting like this to the 9 point instead of splitting to the 10 point. But I also really like this play 2 down. Very aggressive to play it like that.
Yeah, can I add something, Mark?
Sure.
So here is Mark is showing what is it? It's an unlimited game. It's a single game, as we call it at Backgammon Galaxy. So yeah, so here it's the best move is to just play 2 down. But if you are ahead at the score in a match point game, you prefer to split the 3 and play 4 down. This is more defensive game plan. So if you are behind at the score, you tend to play 2 down in a match point. And if you are behind in the score, you tend to play from the back. It's always like that at the first moves. Whenever you need to play from the back checkers, it means you are playing more defensively.
Yeah, the reason is when you play the back checkers, you're aiming to make a high anchor. That's an anchor over here, because then you prevent your opponent from blitz attacking you, and you're not getting primed. So that's why it's a defensive move to split to try to get an anchor. We call it an anchor when it's a point in your opponent's home board over here. But if you're behind in the match score, you need to win gammons. You need to win 4 points in one game. Then we play the offensive and aggressive move, this one, which increases your chances of winning a gammon. But you're also going to get gammoned more. Okay,
Yeah,
we had
so-
a good question from Louis, who asks, what about 13 to 9 and 8 to 5? Why is that not correct? Well, you could say it's quite desirable in many ways. We unstack the midpoint and we slot the 5 point, which is actually sometimes it's correct to slot. We call it to slot when you're putting a lone checker on a point in order to make it. But it's not really a great play, because look at the checker utilization after this move. You end up with a stripped 8 point and a stack on the 6 point. So you're kind of slotting the 5 point with the wrong checker. This doesn't look good. It's not a nice structure. If you have 2-1, for instance, then it makes sense to slot, because look at this beautiful checker utilization. This is nice. You unstack the midpoint, brought a builder down, which is 6 pips away from to cover the slot. Perfect. You unstack the heavy 6 point as well. You kept a spare on the 8. This looks beautiful. And this is actually with 2-1, that's the only opening roll where it's correct to slot and leave a direct shot on your side of the board. Any other opening rolls, we don't like to leave a direct shot in range of the opponent. Only with 2-1. The reason is that it's a terrible racing play, and it's a really good priming, terrible racing roll, but it's a really good priming roll. Okay, so we have checker utilization, we have flexibility. Third, we have the concept of purity. And again, it's a bad term. It's been called purity for decades. I don't know why, but I think a better term would be concreteness or something like that. Basically, to have a gapless prime. That is to play pure. When we're playing pure, we're aiming for making a prime without gaps. So this is a pure prime, we say, that we have a pure 4 prime because there are no gaps in it. This is still pure, but slightly less, because now we have 1 prime. This is very impure, because now we have 3 gaps in our prime structure. In a blitzing game plan, we don't mind to be impure, but if you're playing a priming game plan, then it's terrible to be impure. So again, just like utilization and flexibility, purity is something we strive for. It's something we desire. all else being equal, we make the play that is more pure, because it's a good thing to have a concrete and solid prime structure. Why is it a good thing to have a solid prime structure? Well, it does two great purposes. First, it blocks better. So the enemy's back checkers here, they have a hard time getting out. It's going to take them many rolls to first advance and then to jump out and get to freedom. If you have a Swiss cheese prime over here, it's very easy to escape. He can do it in a couple of rolls. So yeah, reason number one is for blocking purposes. Reason number two, let's say that you are actually ahead in the race. That means you want to race, you want freedom with the back checkers. So you're running home, and let's say your opponent has a holding game like this. He's sitting on a contact game. He's sitting on your 3-point with an anchor, and he's building a strong prime over here on his side of the board. So you definitely don't want to get hit. But we are leading in the race here. Well, in which scenario is it easier to bring your checkers home safe? Here, where we have a nice and pure prime, or here, where we have gaps everywhere? Definitely the first. It's much easier to bring your checkers home when you have a solid prime. So again, early in the game, we strive to make pure plays because it's great both for building a prime to block, and it's also great for safe landing when you're bringing your checkers home.
And it's really important in the priming game plans. I know if you have mentioned that. So
yes,
Rosary,
because when you're
yes.
priming, we need a pure prime. We don't want gaps in our prime structure when we're priming.
Just a quick going back to the last move, which was the 3-4. Rosary says if your opponent's checker is on the 5-point, would you play 8-5 and 4 down? Yeah, definitely. Let's say he plays with 5-4.
Let's take that example. That's a good question, because this is also a very important idea. Let's say your opponent opens with a 5-4 like this, and now we roll a 4-3 or a 2-1 or a 4-1. It doesn't matter. Anything where we can hit here, we do it. We hit loose. We call it a loose hit. So we hit, and then we bring a builder down. We're fighting for our key points, and our key points is our golden point, the 5-point, the silver point, which is the 4-point, and the bar point. These are our key points, and there's a fierce battle going on to win these key points. So we hit loose. That's when you hit and you expose yourself. A loose hit. It's simply worth the risk. And the same with 4-3, we would do the same. So another rookie mistake here is to double hit. You see a lot of players doing this. But when your opponent is on one of your key points, you don't want to double hit. You want to fight for that key point. So don't double hit. Just stay there, stay slotted, and try to make the point. So basically any roll here, also a 6-2, for instance, you would do the same. You hit loose. 5-1, you hit loose. 6-1, you don't hit loose because you got something better to do. You can build a priming point. So structure, it beats a loose hit. It's simply just better. Another question that I always get is, after we hit loose, which 4 is better? Is it better to unstack and bring a builder down, or is it better to split the back checkers? Both seems to be awfully good plays. True, both are great. My rule is the following. If we hit loose down here from the 8-point or the 6-point, then the best secondary die is always to unstack the midpoint and bring another builder down. The reason is that we only have 8 men in the zone when we hit, so we need the 9th man in the zone. It really adds a lot of extra firepower to our blitz attack and to our priming potential. So it's always a little bit better to bring a builder down. Now, the variation where your opponent opened with a 6-3, let's say, and he played it like this, and now you roll a 6-2. Now it's the other way around, because now the hit comes from the midpoint. So you're already unstacking the midpoint and bringing a 9th man to the zone. Therefore, the more balanced play is now to split with the back checkers. Right? So the rule is, if you hit loose from the 8 or 6, bring a man down. If you hit loose from the midpoint, like here, you split with a secondary die. Okay, a little specific tip.
Right.
Okay, concept number 4, freedom. Freedom with the back checkers. Our back checkers desire to be free. They don't like being trapped. So for that reason, early in the game, we often split the back checkers. We need to get them going. We don't want to end up here on the 24 point and getting primed. So I call this concept freedom. And like the three others, it's something we desire. We desire freedom. We hate to be trapped. So get these guys going and build an advanced anchor. That's the best way to ensure freedom. Freedom is it's kind of like on a continuous scale. If you have split your back checkers, now you have more freedom than before. You're still getting trapped with two backmen, but at least you have a little bit more freedom. You make an anchor, great. Now you actually have quite a high degree of freedom. You're not getting trapped very much. And then the best case scenario is when you fully escape your back checkers. Now you have what we call full freedom, and that's a great advantage. Typically, the player who reaches full freedom first is winning. There was a question earlier. I don't remember who asked it, but it was about how do we know whether we're in the big opening game, the middle game, and so forth. I basically have 3 stages of the game. The opening game is just part of the middle game. And so the definition of a middle game is that both players have their back checkers, at least one or more, in the opponent's front position, which is here. And the opponent has back checkers, at least one, in our front position. When this is the case, we're in the first stage of the game, the middle game, or I have a fancy term for it, the undefined stage, because the game plans are not totally defined yet. We're still trying to maximize across all 4 game plans. And this is where the complicated strategy is, because it's a fierce battle here with hitting and priming and trying to raise, trying to anchor up. It's very complicated. The moment that one player achieves full freedom, so let's say we have this position here. Now we, as blue, achieve full freedom. The position stabilizes. It becomes much simpler. Now it's clear that we are playing for the race. The enemy is playing for contact. He might get lucky and roll double sixes and catch up in the race, but as it is, we are winning the race here. So there's not as much strategy going on here. It's a much simpler game. And then you have the third stage of the game, which is when all contact is broken and it's just a straight race. That's the simplest of all the game types. So it gets simpler and simpler the closer to the end we get. Here, the strategy is just to get your checkers into your home board, have them pretty nice distributed so you didn't waste too much energy bringing them in, and then take them off faster than your opponent. It turns into a dice battle. But it's especially in the first stage of the game where there's a lot of strategy, and that's where you have to apply these ideas. So again, checker utilization, flexibility, purity, and freedom with the back checkers. Those are my top 4 of concepts that we're trying to optimize for. That's what we desire to do. And the only reason that we don't optimize any of these is if it's too risky. So that's the risk-reward calculation we have to do over the board. Okay, guys, that was our little presentation here. So let's do some questions.
Just something that I wanted to add in the racing game, but I just see that you made a good position, a bearing position. So always remember to make the triangle shape when you are bearing in your checkers, like as Marc just did it right now with the blue checkers. You always put the checkers on, try to make the triangle shape. So here, white is just a great example of a bad bearing position. It's just you have gaps, you have the worst gaps, and you have a lot of checkers on the deuce and the ace point. And the great example of the blue checkers, where you can bear off in the best shape. You have the triangle shape. You have most checkers on the 6 point.
Right.
And
the reason why we like the triangle shape is because this is where we minimize the effort to get into the home board while still maximizing a nice distribution. Because obviously we would prefer to just have them all on the ace point. This is faster to get them off. But if you ended up with this end game position, white would have wasted so much energy to get them all there. So blue would probably already be halfway done with taking off his checkers. So yeah, it's a good point, Hos. Aim for the triangle shape when you're bearing in.
yeah, this is kind of checker utilization in a bear off position.
Yeah, racing
You can
efficiency,
call
I
it.
call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's see if we have some questions. Okay, this one is for you, Hus. Double 4 in the opening, I play 13 to 5. Is it better to play 24-20 and 8 to 4? You can take this one, Hus.
Okay, yeah. So you can make
Remember
those
to
plays.
share your board, please,
Yeah, sure.
so we can visualize it. And by the way, you can't roll double 4 in the opening. It's only in the second roll of the game, but that's probably
Yes.
also what you mean. Just
Yeah.
a little.
Yes. So you can do that. You can always do that, right? You can always play for whatever you desire, but it's not good for the rest of the game, for the next rolls that you're gonna have.
Let's see some
So-
examples on the board.
Yes. So let's say your opponent rolls something like 5-2, or maybe it's, I don't know, maybe he plays 5. I don't know. Yeah, 5-2 is fine. I don't want to make it too fancy, but here you can see that if you play to the 20 point and you come down, you're doing two great things, instead of one good thing to get the 5 point, because you have front loaded your checkers, which is something that you don't want, and you don't achieve your freedom from the anchor coming up to the 20 point. And later on, if you roll some big doubles, you're not ready to just go for the racing game. For example, if you play like this, if you get the 5 point, it's really great to just go for the racing game. If you roll double sixes, double fives, and the game is over, almost over for your opponent. And the 5 points is really amazing to have it from your opponent, because let me explain this. So if you have the 5 point from your opponent, you are eliminating almost all of your opponent's game plans. Let's say your opponent wants to prime you. It's almost impossible to prime you, right? So you're not gonna get primed. I've created this position, but it still has the 6 point open, and this is really hard to achieve for your opponent to make this position. So it eliminates the priming game plan from your opponent, and if you get blitzed, another game plan that your opponent can have, if you get hit on somewhere on your board, on the outer board, you can always get into the best point on the game. So it's almost impossible to get you blitzed. And when you roll big doubles, you can always, take off from the back checkers. Let's say double fives, double sixes. You're winning the game. Okay, so this is really great to get your opponent's 5 point, doing two great thing instead of one good thing. And yeah,
I would like
it's
to
more backloaded.
I would like to elaborate here, Hossein. I think that was a great explanation. Thank you very much.
So you can share your
so-
screen if you want.
No, it's okay. Let's just stay here
Okay.
in yours. That's fine. Stay here in this move. This goes back to the idea of game plans. And there's something quite profound here this position is showing us. And that is the idea of staying balanced in terms of your game plans. In the old days, back in the 60s and the 70s, maybe more the 70s and the 80s actually, players tended to play more pure because they preferred the priming game plans. In the 60s and before that, players preferred the racing game plans, so they played more safe. So you could say if you're maximizing racing, you might just run all the way.
Yeah.
This is maximizing your racing game plan, but it's terrible for priming and blitzing. And if you the same way, try to move it back, Hus. The same way, if you make the 5 point here, this is great for priming. Not that great for priming because you're a little bit front loaded, but it's great for blitzing. But you didn't do anything about your racing game plan. You neglected your racing game plan. So when we have the chance to optimize more game plans at once, that's a very balanced way to play, and it's a very strong style of play, and that means we're open to wherever the dice will take us in the future. We're ready to capitalize on it. So the balanced play here, try to make the best play, just to show it, visualize it. We're optimizing all 4 game plans. We're improving freedom for the race, and we have a good contact anchor. We're improving our prime value because we just created structure. And the 9 point is actually part of our prime, and we have builders. We improved our blitz attack because now we have 10 men in the zone if we get a blitz. So it's race, contact, priming, and blitzing. It's all. We're improving all 4 game plans. Very, very robust and strong move.
Right. And remember that the concepts that Marc explained, those are main concepts. There's more concepts in any kind of positions, right? So for example, here you can say the concept of having backloaded checkers instead of having front-loaded checkers. You don't want front-loaded checkers,
Right.
and you need some connectivity with this play. You can see the connectivity, right? So if you played like this, you are disconnected these 2 checkers from the rest of the checkers. But by
We
playing,
don't have time to come into these concepts now.
right?
But,
Okay.
but we will say that both me and Hossein are actually doing private lessons. So if you're interested, you can always send us a message. I charge $200 an hour. Hossein charges $40 an hour. I am teaching Hossein to teach. So you're kind of my material that you get when you get Hossein as a private teacher. So that's cool. Okay, should we go on to the next question? We can take one from Luai. Oh, he has a couple of questions here. So the first one is, I think he's asking me, in your opinion, if you were to categorize the effectiveness of strategies in order, what would that look like? Yes, it depends. It always depends. I would say if I had to give an answer, I would say priming is the best one, but it always depends on the board. Again, this is a quote from Mochi, the best player in the world. He says, you don't decide on your game plan, the board position and the dice tells you what your preferred game plan is.
Oh, you made it terrible for me that I didn't mention that in the beginning.
I think you did
obviously.
in some way.
Oh,
right.
Yeah, sorry. That's, of course, his quote. Thank you so much, Marc.
Next question is backgame not a strategy? It is, but the backgame, maybe you can show a backgame position.
Yeah, we wanted to go through the contact variations.
Just show an example of a backgame so we know what we're talking about.
Okay.
And what is defined as a backgame.
So this is a backgame position,
right?
Basically.
Because
and if you have
basically every time your opponent has 2 anchors in your home board, that's a backgame. Or if we have 2 anchors over here. So we call it a holding game if it's a single anchor and a back game if it's 2 anchors. Back game is just a variation of the contact game plan. So, or the waiting game, basically, because the objective is just to build your prime and wait until you get to hit the turnaround shot. Sometimes you shouldn't even hit in a back game if it's too early. If you're underdeveloped still in your front position, sometimes it's dangerous to go and break your back game to hit something. So you typically wait, you build your prime, and then you wait until the right time comes, and then you hit the turnaround shot. The back game can be a very effective contact game, but it's also a little bit risky because you lose a lot of gammons because you have so many men trapped. In the old days, you had some players, like I didn't experience that myself, but I read in books, like some of Roberti's old books and stuff like that, that you had players that actually favored playing back game. So in the opening game, they just slotted everything to get hit a lot. And then they have 7 men back, and then they started to play the back game. This is not a winning strategy. This is a hugely losing strategy. You lose so many gammons and backgammons. So back game is something we do as a plan B. It's just a very strong form of waiting game. And of course, then there's the follow-up question, which back game is stronger? Is it the 1-3? Is it the 2-3, etc.? Again, that depends on the timing. How many pips are you behind? But if I had to say one, I would say the 2-3 back game is probably the strongest of them all. That's
paper.
The one that works best in most cases.
Right. Yeah, and you don't need too many pips to be behind.
Right. It's robust in terms of timing. Whereas if you have the 1-2 back game, try to set up the 1-2 back game.
Yeah.
That's the deepest of all the back games. That's very vulnerable to timing issues. It doesn't take much, then blue will crunch his front position. And when you are the back game player, the only thing that cannot happen is that you crunch your front position, because then it's all over. Then how are you going to win? Even if you hit the turnaround shot, you're crunched, he's going to come in immediately and come around. It's almost impossible. So timing and avoiding to crunch your front position is key in a back game. And with a 1-2 back game, it's so extreme because you need to be at least 100 pips behind. 80 doesn't do it. 100, that's how many pips you need to be behind to preserve decent timing. And the timing sweet spot is around 130 to 140 pips. So if you just go to the 1-2-3 back game, for instance, it's much better. Here it's okay to just have 70 pips behind, 65 pips. It's okay. And the timing sweet spot is around 100 pips from the 2-3 back game.
Right.
Okay, let's see. We have more questions here in the chat. So Walid is asking, why do you want to avoid a gap on the 5 point during bear off? Maybe you can answer that one, Hos. In a racing position, why do we? I think he's talking about a straight race. Why is it bad to have a gap on the 5 point? We can answer this very quickly.
So the 4 and the 5 point gap are the worst, and you don't want that, because every time you roll a 5 or a 4, if you have, let's say, you have this position, right? You mean it's good, probably you think it's good to have a gap on the 5 or 4. That's the worst, because every time you roll a 5 or 4, you will be playing from the 6 point.
Yeah, you're not going to get a checker off.
Yeah, you can't get a checker off.
So it's just much slower to have gaps. That's why we're trying to aim for a good distribution where we don't have any gaps. Then we simply get our checkers off quicker.
Yes. So you always try to have these gaps filled, and do not put the checkers on the first and the deuce point.
If you can avoid it.
If you can avoid it.
Okay, let me share my screen, Hos, for the next question here. And again, if you don't see my screen, you have to click on my name or webcam in the Zoom window. Okay, we've got a question from Rose Harry. And I'm not sure, I think it's, excuse me, I'm not natively English, but I think it's a female name, but I'm not sure. Please correct me if it's a male name. Rose Harry asks, if our opponent has a prime, we need to split, but after split, we also open up to be attacked. What are we going to do? Well, that's a good question. Let's take an example here. Let's say we have something going on over here, and now we have back checkers, and our opponent has the following position. Something like this, let's say. Here we go. And now we roll let's say we roll a 3 and a 2. Okay, so we could, the first thing I see here is that it's very nice to make the 10 point. So I think that the 3 must be played from 13 to 10. And now we have a 2 to play. And because the 10, it's structure, right? We want to make points. When we can make points, we make points. But with the 2 to play, we have a choice. We can already rule out slotting. That's too aggressive because we don't want to get hit. We leave a double shot, and then we get a third man sent back behind a prime. So that would be a very stupid move. Let's eliminate that. We can also eliminate this play because that's breaking structure. We don't want to break structure. And for the same argument, we don't want to make this either. So we're down to 2 choices. We can either play this one down, which is pretty good. We're creating more flexibility. We're getting an extra builder to the 7 point. But not great because we already built the 5 point. And as Hossein likes to say, the 11 point is the cousin of the 5 point. So it doesn't have that much value, this builder here. But we could do it. It is a constructive play to bring the 2 down. Or we could split with the back checkers. And hence the question, do we dare to split the back checkers? And I did give you the rule of thumb before, but let's emphasize it because this is really important. Every time your opponent has a prime formation, and this is exactly what the opponent has here. This is a prime formation, not a blitz formation. it's not dangerous to split. It's actually dangerous to not split, because the threat is that you get primed. The threat is not that you get blitz attacked and closed out. The enemy only has 9 men in the zone here, has 3 men all the way back. So you're never going to get closed out. It would be very unlucky if your opponent launches a blitz attack and closes you out. So it's riskier to not split. So when you're facing a prime formation, we split the back checkers. We need to get up and get an advanced anchor, preferably at the edge of the prime. Sometimes it's also very effective to split to, this is what we see here, to 1 pip away from the edge of the prime. The edge would be here on the 21 point, but that's a little bit risky because he's going to attack us there to extend their prime 1 point at a time. So splitting to 1 pip away from the edge is a very good maneuver. But we split. We're scared of getting primed, not blitzed. Okay, let's do another variation here where we change white's position. Now let's say white has a position like this one. Here, this one is dangerous to split. If we do that play now, we could get blitzed attacked because white has 11 men in the zone. And this is a good tip I learned from my old buddy, Phil Simborg. He said that instead of counting how many men you have in the zone, count how many men you don't have in the zone and then subtract it from 15. So it's quick to see you have 11 men in the zone because you just have 4 over on the other side of the board. So 11 men in the zone, that's a lot. We have a deep point made. We have a stack. This, according to Hossein's explanation, is a blitz formation. So it's dangerous to split because we can risk getting closed out. And furthermore, it's actually not dangerous to just stay there because we're not really threatened to be primed in the future. In the future, if we want to escape, we can because they got all these gaps, so it's easy to escape. Here we want to invite the enemy into a priming battle. So the best play is actually this one, which is very aggressive move. And this is a very pure, hyper efficient and utilizing the checkers well, and it's also flexible. So it's a very beautiful play, actually. It's very desirable. It's a little bit risky, and it's a little bit of an advanced play. But I would say if you just make that play 2 down, that's also fine. This is completely fine. The key here is to not split. So I hope that answered your question, Rose Harry. Okay, do we have more questions? Let's see. Torsten asks if we ever slot in the opening roll with 4-1. So actually, that's a good question because I said that you do it with 2-1, and I said that was the only one. So you could do it with 4-1. It's just slightly inferior. It's a little bit better to split the back checkers. And the reason is that with 4-1, unlike 2-1, you actually have a little bit of a racing lead. When you're ahead 5 pips, that's more than being ahead 3 pips. If you're ahead by 4 pips and your opponent is on roll, then it's an even race. So the fact that you're up 5 pips and your opponent's on roll, that means you have 1 pip of advantage. Whereas if you roll 2-1, you have -1 pip you have 1 pip of disadvantage. So 4-1 is a little bit better racing play. Because it's a little bit better racing play, it's also a little bit worse priming play. Because remember the priming and the racing and timing aspect. If you're behind in the race, you want to prime. If you're ahead in the race, you want to race. So here you have a little bit of a racing lead. So it's slightly more risky to go do like this because you don't want to get hit when you have a racing lead. Whereas if you split the back checkers, that fits well in the racing game plan because now we get the back checkers moving. Also, there's a tactical reason here as well. With the builder now being on the 9 point instead of on the 11 point, you have fewer cover numbers. The optimal location for this builder is to be 6 pips away. That's where you optimize dice combinations to cover. So it's a little bit inefficient to have this 4 pips away. Also, you duplicate your own 4 because you want to play the 4 there. You also want to play the 4 there. And the last argument I'll give you is after you play the 4 down to the 9 point, you already have such great flexibility. Already, all of your rolls make a key point in your prime formation next turn, except for 5-1 and 3-2. But the rest make a key point. So it's a little bit overkill to slot. You're already doing something great. So with 4-1, it's a little bit better to just split the back checkers. That being said, it is a cool play. We do optimize checker utilization. It's flexible. It's pure. It's a very desirable move. We failed to optimize freedom, but we've optimized the 3 other concepts. So it is a cool play. It's very aggressive. It tends to lead into more complicated games because it's more likely you get more men hit back, and that complicates things. Where if you split the back checkers, that simplifies things typically. So if you're playing a stronger player, I would advise just splitting the back checkers. If you're the stronger players, you could go ahead and slot, but you get into more back games this way, longer games. Yeah, that's my explanation for that.
Right. So for opening rows, whenever you touch your back checkers, it means you're playing defensively. That's just the rule of thumb. And with the like middle numbers like 2-3, 4-3, 5-4, and 3-4, 5-3, 5-2. Whenever you play 2 down, you're playing aggressively, and whenever you split from the back checkers, you're playing defensively.
Right. Okay, guys, I think we have to wrap it up. We've been gone an hour and 20. I hope you all enjoyed it. Maybe we'll do it again. This one was like a beginner's course. Of course, if you want more advanced topic, we have a lot of stuff on our YouTube channel. And if you want private lessons, you can send us a message. I charge $200 an hour. And Hossein, who's a master level player, 1 step below grandmaster, but soon to be grandmaster, he charges $40. And I'm teaching Hossein my philosophies, my strategies. So if you take on Hossein as your private tutor, you will get some of my material and strategies. But yeah, thanks you all for watching. You want to say anything, Hossein, to the people?
Mikhail says, could you give us your quick pip count method? Marc has a great video about how to count the pips, and it's a combination of pip counts, and it's really great to practice and get good at it, so you won't be having any trouble counting the pips. If you have any question like how to count the pips or something like that, you can always search it at our YouTube Backgammon Galaxy channel, and you can find it there. Yeah.
Cool. And if you have any questions of Backgammon Galaxy, you can always just write us on Instagram, Backgammon Galaxy, or send an email to Hossein on support@backgammongalaxy.com. I'll add that here as well. Okay, we're
Thank you
getting
so
a lot
much,
of praise
guys.
in the chat, so I guess that's great.
Yeah.
Well done, Hossein.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
And thank you, guys.
thank you all for watching.
It was fun.
It was fun. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Record